Hi everybody and welcome back to another episode of the Linux Guy. Today we're going to talk about how to set up Piwigo. More specifically, we're really just setting up a web server that uses a LAMP stack. Piwigo is an example of that, so we're using it as an example. And it's a little known project that I'm trying to shed some light on. I think people should know about it. Piwigo, for those of you who don't know, is basically like a photo viewing web browser thing. So let's go up to their website here. I've pulled it up and you can see Piwigo. We've got an app, we've got a web interface, and that's pretty much what it's for. It's an open source photo gallery for the web. It's designed for organizations, teams, and individuals, it says. So I would use it as an individual. I think it's a pretty cool project. Let's go and click Get Piwigo, and you see we're actually doing the self-hosted Piwigo as a part of our explanation of how to set up a web server. But they do have a cloud-hosted option too if you prefer that. They also have a net install and an upgrade guide, but we're just going to use their install guide, which I'm going to open in a new tab now. So they have 4 steps. We're going to deviate from them a little bit because of the way we're setting ours up, but hopefully my explanation that came before in my previous video on setting up a LAMP stack and how to set up PHPMyAdmin will be helpful when we move through how to set up Piwigo in this instance. So let's go ahead and go through their steps. So the first thing they do is say to download the full archive. This link takes you back here, and then if you download it, you will get this file right here, which I've already downloaded to save some time. So what we need to do is we need to extract it. So I'm going to open this and drag this over here to extract from XFCE. Use whatever you need to extract it, but that's just how I like to do it. And now we have our web server right here. What we need to do next is we need to get all this stuff in our web server. So let's go ahead and move it. So what we want to do is we want to go ahead and MV, and we're going to start in our home directory. So the // is our home directory, and downloads is where we have that folder. And Piwigo. We're going to go and pull everything over, and we're going to put it in our web server, which is var www/photos, which is what they'd like it to be called. So what I want to do is I want to move everything from Piwigo into photos. Now, if we look in their documentation, they have you actually change this sooner. We're going to do it all as one step so that we can create a directory called photos. We're just going to move it into our pre-made directory called photos. So let's go ahead and move everything. So you may need root permissions to do this, or you may not. But once you're in there, you can go ahead and cd over to var www and photos, and you will see that's all the stuff that we had in this folder. We should now actually be able to load our web server. So let's go into a new page and let's go to localhost. And it gave us an error. That's not surprising. A lot of times it'll throw you an error the first time you go to set something up, but thankfully Piwigo gives us a good indicator of what we need to do. It says there's a folder called data that doesn't have the right permissions, and it tells us to give it access using chmod. I'm normally against using 777, but since it specifically asks for it, I will do what it asks. So let's do sudo chmod 777, and you see we have that folder right here, data. So let's do _data. And now we've updated the permissions. Let's try to run this again. And here we are. Here's the landing page for Piwigo. Really, once you have your LAMP stack set up, it's almost as easy as just copying the stuff over, and your web server will start the installation process from a web browser. The next thing we need to do is go through this installation process and see what we have here. We need to set up a database and a username. So let's go ahead and do the username now. I'm going to just call this username Piwigo user. And I'm going to give him the password of password. And I'm going to make a fake email address here also, unknown at anon.com. And here's our user. But we also need a database, which we don't have yet, but we're going to make one. So let's go ahead and call this Piwigo DB user, which is what their documentation calls theirs. And then we're going to need a password as well. So let's go ahead and set our password. And then finally, we need a database name, which we're going to call Piwigo, to make it easy. Now you need to have multiple databases on websites. You may want to come up with a convention, but if you're just going to be using one database on your website, go ahead and make it something easy for you to remember. Now I'm going to open a new tab now, and I'm going to go to localhost. Again, this would be your IP address if you're using a remote server, but I'm on the server, so I'm going to use localhost PHPMyAdmin so that I can manage our database ecosystem. And I'm going to log in as root. And once we're logged in, we're going to go ahead and make a new database. This database is going to be called, remember back here, we called it Piwigo, so we're going to call this Piwigo. Click Create. and we can make a table now. However, Piwigo is going to do that for us. In fact, it even has a table prefix for us, so I'm going to go ahead and leave that empty. We've got our Piwigo database now. The next thing we need to do is we need to specify a user to access this database, which we've decided to call Piwigo user according to the documentation. So we'll go back up here to home, and then we can go to user accounts in PHPMyAdmin, and we can add a new user account. I'm going to call the username Piwigo. I'm going to do the password as password. You should obviously use a strong password. Mine's extremely weak because it's just password. Specifying a host is optional, but I like to when I can. Since this is only going to be on the local host, I'm going to go ahead and type localhost there. I like that PHPMyAdmin will even generate a password for you if you want. Of course, we don't want to do that today, but another cool feature is you can grant the privileges right here when you're checking it, so I'm going to go ahead and check all. I know everything's looking correct here, so let's go ahead and click go. And we have added the new user. It shows you the command that it actually ran on the server. You could do all of this on the server, but you can see this is a very long, complicated command. It's just much easier to do right here in PHPMyAdmin, which is why I recommend everyone check this project out. And now, we should be able to go back to Piwigo. All of this stuff should be good to go, and we can start our installation. Okay, so we can see at the bottom it says Piwigo installation completed. I expected this at the top too. It wants us to actually edit a configuration file. So we're going to copy all of this stuff. And it says put this in local config. So if we go back to our web server, by the way, it's always assuming you're starting at your web server. So if you're finding stuff like this, that's what it's talking about. So if we go to ls in our web server, you'll see there is a folder called local. Let's go into there and then config. And you'll see that actually that the file that they want, database.inc.php, doesn't exist. So what we're going to do is we're going to go copy that file name, sudo nano, paste that file name so we can create a new one. And now we're just going to go ahead and copy this configuration into it. And Control O to write out, Control X to close it. And now we can visit our gallery. And there we go. We've got a new web server. At this point, we can close out of all this other stuff. You can go back to your downloads and you can delete these extra copies. We don't need them anymore. We've got our actual web server running, so we don't need a backup of it. We can even close some of these other things and reload our page. Let's do that. So now, if we go to localhost, everything's been configured correctly. We'll land on our website. Now I can do whatever I want to do here in the web console that I just installed. Check out Piwigo. It's a cool open source photo gallery web server. Hopefully this was helpful if you wanted to install any kind of web server on a LAMP stack. As always, thank you for watching The Linux Guy. Make sure to follow us on LBRY and BitChute. Send us a tip if you feel so inclined, and we will see you guys in the next one.